Hello, I'm Bob McKeown from the Fifth Estate at the CBC Broadcast Centre in Toronto, alongside Lisa Mayer, an associate producer with the show, and my collaborator on the premiere, which, as we hope you know, was broadcast on the CBC network on Friday last. The show that we're here to talk about in the first Q&A of the new season was the Muskoka Mystery. And I trust if you're watching us now, you know what that was about. But essentially it was the disappearance 20 years ago of 4 elderly people, known ever since as the Muskoka Mystery. And we introduced you for the first time through secret police documents to the police investigation, what the police believe happened, and whom they believe were responsible. So, Lisa, I don't know about you, but I've never worked on a story that went back that far where you could introduce so much new material.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work that far back, but it also made it very difficult to do so, right? 20 years ago was a really long time.
Yeah. And also doing it without official cooperation, because in the end, this past summer, we had to go to court to get access to hundreds of pages of police documents, because the Ontario Provincial Police, though they had an investigation back 20 years ago when this happened, 1998, 99, 2000, refused to talk to us about it. And that was really the big breakthrough, I think, for us, that when we looked at that volume of secret information, you could actually piece together what the police had seen at the time.
Yeah, and it's exciting because it's this huge, thick binder of almost 500 pages of documents. It weighs probably 20 pounds that I was carrying around with me everywhere I went for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So.
With recurring themes, by the way, that come up in your questions. We asked you for questions and you did not disappoint. And many of the questions were on that topic, the police investigation, what happened then, what hasn't happened since. So Lisa, the first one to you, this is from Laurie Cook-Lockie, who says, what's the status of the case with the OPP?
As far as we know, the OPP says it's still an open investigation. Yeah. Like you said, it's 2 decades old. We've heard from people who live nearby that they've seen police on the property, that they think that there have been searches over the past 10 or so years, maybe in the last 5 years, but nothing concrete that we've heard, just that it's still open.
Yeah, and we know at the time there were exhaustive searches with dogs on the land and in the woods, in this densely wooded area, in Standing Lake, which is Siding Lake, which is right next to one of the retirement homes from which these people disappeared. Nothing was found, and it's hard to believe in that kind of physical search that would change for the better after decades.
Exactly, yeah.
Question. The OPP, this is from Lynn Winfield. The OPP says it's ongoing, but don't do anything. So how can they say it's ongoing, since that female cop, now we should step aside here, the investigator at the time was an OPP detective named Erin Burke. And we attempted to talk to Detective Burke. She's since retired from the force, she's left the force. And she would not talk to us. And in fact, we understand the OPP has pretty much told her she can't talk to us. Now, is that a matter of protocol, or is that a matter of a confidentiality agreement? Or?
It might be a bit of both. I think as far as we understand, police do sign documents that tell them they can't talk about certain things once they're finished because of confidentiality. And of course, if this is an ongoing investigation and she's not involved anymore, that would seem to make sense.
Yeah. But again, because we went to court and were able to get the documents that we were, which was more than 500 pages of them, we could piece together, in a sense, what she did at the time. And actually, because a lot of those notations are in her own words, it's almost as if you're inside her mind as she's doing it.
Yeah, and it honestly, like, it's 500 pages of court documents, but it reads like a good novel. Yeah. It takes you step by step through how the investigations went and what kind of technology they were looking for and details of what they were looking for when using different, forensic identification chemicals and how they did the scuba search, and it's fascinating.
Now, one of the keys to the unlocking of the investigation then and through these documents now was the disappearance of a local woman in the Huntsville, Ontario area named Joan Lawrence, and she was known as the Cat Lady. And there are questions here, Lisa, that I'm going to direct to you that deal with the cats. Lynn Winfield's question actually ends with, if they found the dead cats, they should be able to find the 4 dead people. Now, what do we know about what they did find as far as the cats are concerned?
So one of their first searches was in December of 1998, and it was a physical search of the property where Joan was known to last be living.
Right.
And they were searching different outbuildings. There were half a dozen outbuildings on the property that different people lived in. They did a ground search, and among other things, what we know they found were dead cats.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know the circumstance, if they were found in the shed Joan was living in or if they were buried somewhere, but what we do know is they were found with bullet fragments in them. They tested the fragments and they couldn't determine the caliber. I don't know a ton about ballistics, so I don't know exactly what that means, but we do know they found cats that had been shot.
Yeah, we know that she had 30 or more cats, and we don't have an exact number as to how many were found.
No.
But no bodies, no human remains were found, neither hers nor the 3 other elderly men who disappeared at more or less the same time. I guess what it tells you is whoever killed the cats was happy to leave them there. If, in fact, those people have been abducted or killed or both, someone didn't want them found. Let me go on. Another key element to the unraveling of the disappearance, especially of Joan Lawrence, came when it was discovered by Detective Burke that Lawrence was complaining about a missing tax refund check at the time. And in fact, she was going to confront her landlords, the Land family, which, if you saw the Muskoka Mystery, are at the heart of all of this. And basically that was when she was last seen. And Detective Burke went into the bank files to try to figure out what she could figure out. So Brian DiPaolo asks, who cashed the check, the tax refund check? In those days, it had to be the bank, so whose bank cashed the check and under whose name? Well, we don't know all of that. Getting access to the bank records was impossible for us. We only could do what Detective Burke had done. What she realized was the tax refund check that Joan Lawrence was worried about, that she was going to confront her landlords about, was cashed at some time after it was sent out. She hadn't received it, apparently. She was telling friends she hadn't received it. When Detective Burke found it, it had an endorsement on the back, presumably the name Joan Lawrence, but from what she found out, it wasn't Joan Lawrence's signature. So we've got to presume that somebody else intercepted the check and either took it to a bank or a check cashing store or whatever, signed the name, the proper name, but not the right signature.
And something to say to that too that we didn't get into the documentary too much about is that we know from speaking with people who used to work at the post office and the police investigation that Joan's landlords were allowed to pick up her mail. You could sign documentation that says someone else can get your mail for you. And that they had a lot of records with her signature on it to be able to check. She worked with the law office pretty frequently when she was selling her first home, so they had documentation with her signature. So it would have been easy for them to put them side by side and say,
that's
not a match.
Her. And what it did do, of course, is lead to David Land as someone of interest in this financial trail, because what Detective Burke found is that Joan Lawrence had a joint account with her landlord, David Land. And we know that there actually was only one bank card issued on that account, Joan Lawrence's account, in David Land's name. And we know that that was used a number of weeks after Joan Lawrence was last seen. So that's pretty important information.
So I dug them up here, I turned them over and found the false teeth kind of impacted in the clay mud. I right away told Scott about it, I phoned my mom about it. And for a couple of days, the teeth just remained there because I was not sure if I wanted to get involved. And then my mom kept convincing me there's no closure for these seniors, so you got to get involved.
The false teeth. Now, I'm not sure how important the false teeth are, but it is an example of the impact of this case on Muskoka today, where seemingly mundane or ordinary things can take place. And people think, I wonder if that's part of the Muskoka mystery, the false teeth.
Well, it's funny because, playing off what you just said, how it factors into everyone's lives out there. The way we found the story about the false teeth was Timothy, the producer, and I and Xander from the Walrus were walking down the railroad tracks that cut through the lake. And this woman yelled at us from her balcony, and she said, "Are you guys from the CBC? Are you looking into those 4 missing seniors?" And this was one of our first visits out there. We hadn't really told anyone we'd be up there. So we went and spoke with her, and off the cuff she mentioned, "Oh, I actually found some false teeth in my garden." And her garden borders right on the lake. And it's kind of a part of the lake that the railroad tracks cut the lake from. In front of her house is a bit of like a swampy area. So she was digging up her garden and found these teeth that had possibly washed up or possibly were buried in the dirt from a long time ago. She called police, they took the teeth, they did a report, they photographed the area, and that's the last she's heard of it. She told us she's followed up and hasn't heard anything more since then.
Now that actually anticipates another question from Heather Whaley, who asks, why didn't they set up to dig around the area the teeth were found in? But essentially they did.
Yeah, I think the detective that went there probably did quite a thorough job. She said that they were there, I think, over a day, or perhaps they went back the next day. But it is interesting to see how something that could be considered mundane has a different feeling when you live on that lake.
Yeah. Here's a comment actually from Jennifer on Twitter, who says, "Chilling. Hoping improved technology can help find the killers and bring justice for the victims." Brackets, Bob, maybe you can talk about what modern day resources could have improved this investigation. Well, a couple of things to remember here. One is, this is an extraordinary event. When people go missing, when people are officially reported missing, the conventional wisdom in police circles is that 48 to 72 hours, the majority will be located again. And the rest, the vast majority beyond that, will be found in weeks or months. For there to be a disappearance when nothing is found, no living person, no body, is very, very rare. In the area we're talking about, the great out of doors with wildlife and seasons and just all of the vicissitudes of the Muskoka region, to think that you could today find something that you couldn't find 20 years ago is really challenging. Even though obviously forensics improve all the time in terms of DNA, in terms of being able to find some trace of someone's presence. In the great outdoors with cougars and bears and all the things that live in the Muskoka woods, far less likely, I think.
It would be like a needle in a haystack in that dense forest. It's interesting, actually. I spoke to a forensic expert while researching the story who said in a lot of times, 20 years later, you'd be lucky to find a bone fragment or a tooth fragment. And at that point, trying to determine how that person died or what happened is going to be nearly impossible. Yeah.
A couple of legal questions that we've been sent. Susan Cook asks, what about probation for the Lan who went to jail? This is Walter Lan, who had been to jail previously, as a number of the Lan family had, but Walter went to jail the most recently of all the Lans for home invasions. Nothing to do, apparently, with the Muskoka mystery. Anyway, Susan wants to know, this man has just got out of jail for breaking and entering, and he's going into seniors' homes for repairs. He is now in Toronto running a repair company that advertises, this is not a laughing matter, a senior citizen's discount. So what about probation for that man? How can he get out of jail and then be doing this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because after his the first charge for fraud against the 4 seniors, he received 6 months of a conditional sentence, which usually means house arrest, and 6 months of probation. Now, when he was caught for break and enter, which then put him in jail for the 11 and a half years that ended not too long ago, it was just as his probation was ending. It was exactly a year after his conviction. Yeah. So now we know that part of his conditional release from this recent 11 and a half year stint in jail, he has something that says he's only allowed to go into homes with some kind of supervisor, someone that's approved by his probation officer. Yeah. We don't know who that is, but that is supposed to be part of it.
The question again keeps coming up. There's so much circumstantial evidence here, or so it would seem in what we've put together and in what the police investigation found, that there's a lot of circumstance pointing to the interest of the Lan family in all of this. What is there any explanation? A number of people ask as to why the OPP have not pursued the case any further than they apparently have.
Well, like you said earlier, it's so hard for them to be able to charge, never mind convict, without finding a body, right? Because the thing about these people who went missing is perhaps they did wander off into the bush and got, attacked by an animal or something. And if you don't have a body, there's no way to prove that that wasn't the case.
Although, 4 of them, in more or less the same place, at more or less the same time, from homes run by the same family, it really defies credulity that they could all, and plus they're people who are infirm to one degree or another, mentally or physically or both, to think that they could, in this isolated place, walk away on their own power without money, without family support, is really difficult to imagine.
And 3 of whom, some of the family members were convicted of stealing their money after they had disappeared, right? I mean, it does seem to indicate something else, but it is very, very hard for a Crown to be able to prove murder when there is no body.
Yeah. Carol Davies-Wigley asks a question that is fundamentally a good one. How were these so-called retirement homes allowed to even exist by the government of Ontario? Were they licensed? Were they routinely inspected? Were the people in their care followed as to their health and welfare? Obviously not, or this could not have happened. Yes, I mean, I think what is true is they weren't followed, they weren't inspected because they didn't have to be. These were retirement homes only in the vaguest sense. It was how the lands were marketing them as Christian retirement homes, affordable home-like care. They were going to Toronto to find people who were so desperate that they would come with strangers 3 hours away to the woods of Muskoka to live. But they were not in any category we understand at the time, which would have been licensable and which would therefore have attracted regular inspection by the authorities. And in fact, Ron House, the mayor of Muskoka, acknowledges he was vaguely aware of them, but that they didn't fall into his purview, and he wasn't cognizant of any local agency or provincial agency that would have kept track of them.
They were essentially rooming houses more than they were retirement homes, right? And they were in the middle of nowhere. And
all right, here's a question that you've briefly touched on. Patty Jo Morris asks, and I'm not sure to whom Patty Jo is referring to, whether to David Lan, who was the focal point of this part of our story, or me. But the question is, has this guy never watched 48 Hours, Dateline, or any American crime show? I actually worked for 48 Hours and Dateline at one point. In the States, just living on the land would have been enough to convict somebody without a body. Can you talk about how not finding bodies factored into the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I don't think that factored into the outcome. I think that is the outcome, is that they couldn't find bodies, right? Because never mind not finding bodies, as far as we know, they didn't find a murder weapon. They didn't find any, vast amount of forensic evidence like bloody clothing or anything like that would point to something like murder. Although the circumstantial evidence is there and is circumstantial, but substantial as well. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence. It seems like they should be able to do something with that, but again, without a body, it's very, very hard for police to do. And I don't think it's something that happens very often in Canada.
It is very unusual for there to be a disappearance and the body is not located within a reasonable period of time. For there to be 4 people who disappear in and around the same place, more or less the same time, pretty much unheard of. For there to be charges laid in such a case with no body, very, very rare. You go online, you really only find a couple of such cases in Canada, and they're individual cases. For there to be a successful prosecution, that's a whole other story. Thank you for watching this Fifth Estate Facebook Q&A. We trust you'll be back next week, as we or our counterparts will be, to answer your questions about our shows all season. And if you want to watch the Muskoka Mystery again, you can do it on the main network, you can do it on News Network, you can do it at cbc.ca/fifth.
You can also find it on Facebook and YouTube, and you can always reach us on Facebook or Twitter. We always want to hear from you. We take tips as well. You can email us at fifth@cbc.ca, and please reach out to us whenever you would like to.
And as we like to say, and we do read everything that you send. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.